Tyler, it's so great chatting with you again. Congrats on your new Netflix series, Live from the Other Side. Considering the impact of life after death on viewers, which was such a phenomenal show and it was so much fun, and then considering your live reading shows, what inspired you to create a live series for Netflix?
Well, this opportunity came up really as an amalgamation of a lot of things. I have my live tour that I do across the country. I have a virtual platform that I'm able to read people virtually all across the world. And then, of course, I do one-on-one readings. And so this show, I really think, evolves as the times do. Medium shows are in many ways progressing and evolving. And I think that the bar is set a little higher now as time goes on. There is something about a live component, seeing something raw, unedited, and really being able to experience the process, the nitty gritty of it all. It can actually, I think, make for a more well-rounded experience and really give people an insight into what exactly happens.
Yeah, and I think this has been so exciting. Netflix has been expanding their interactive space with viewers lately, and with them, creating more programming. What excites you the most about bringing something like mediumship into this interactive space? Because I feel like it's never really been done on streaming, and it's going to be really rare to see.
Absolutely. I think there's really power in demonstrating the process. And I think that even if people don't receive a reading, they can watch that experience in a more succinct way and be able to gauge more nuance than one might be able to gauge in a shortened, edited segment for time. So there really is something to be said about that. And then also just the cultural impact, Netflix's ability to touch on so many different countries across the world. We're able to connect with different demographics, different cultures, and different belief systems around grief and loss and really contribute to that conversation. So I really am very proud of that.
Yeah, I'm very excited for that because, it is a bigger audience. There's so many different people coming from different cultures, different backgrounds. And, there's that level of understanding each other through this sort of thing. Grief is a universal feeling. And for a lot of people to understand this through mediumship too, and to get closure that way, I think it's going to be very special. It must be very fun and humbling.
Thank you. It absolutely is. It's so interesting, and every validation that comes through, it's still as heartwarming as it was, the first time I ever did it when I started working professionally at 16 years old.
And I know these readings you mentioned, they are a little more high stakes because they are unedited, they're in real time. Considering your experience with live readings, how do you prepare yourself now for such an intense live format, especially now the cameras are on in a different way?
Hope for the best. In essence, it's kind of like see a cliff, jump off. And that really, in essence, has defined a lot of my career, being able to kind of find the growth through discomfort, being able to face something head on that does, cause me some degree of anxiety really is the only way that I expand and grow as a person. And that sounds a little cliche, but I find that, there is something to be said about having true faith and in being able to let go and surrender to the possibility that anything could happen. There is something alchemical there, something transformative that becomes more trust. And that's something that's really fun to get to practice.
Something that was also really interesting that you said in your press release was how this kind of project lets you lean into skepticism surrounding mediumship. And again, with a bigger audience, there's going to be also a lot more commentary, coming from both sides. So I'm wondering, how does, Live from the Other Side address the kinds of doubts that, can also open minds and, give another experience to viewers?
Absolutely. Well, I think a big part of the component on this new Netflix show is the aspect of reading not just celebrities, but everyday folks, regular people like people I grew up with that really need help and connections. And one of the aspects that I love about this is while there are going to be some recognizable faces, none of which I'll know in advance, they're going to bring along people that only they will know, people that they feel are worthy or deserving of a reading, perhaps someone in need. And that will allow them to kind of, in some ways, safeguard that experience, kind of convey the integrity of it. And I'm really excited for that. In Hollywood Medium, there was a whole system on production's end of code naming the person, and everyone. It was like the CIA. They had like lists and went to great lengths to keep information from me as we followed lead cars, and they would rent houses, and there were all these links that were gone to. And I think that the live format really allows us to demonstrate that the way that we haven't been able to before.
Yeah. And, I was going to ask you, who are the guests this season? But now that I know, like, yes, it's exactly, you can't know. It's exactly the format as it was on the E show, where they didn't tell you people. So what are you expecting with like these? Like, is there anyone that you would love to read for one of these days that you hope would maybe appear on the show?
Oh, absolutely. There's always a whole list of interesting people, but I would say when it comes to that arena, I always find that where there's the most need, the ability shines. And so Some of the show will have pre-taped content as far as like readings with, again, some recognizable people, some others not, but the main focus will be that live aspect. And, in a timely age, I think it would be very interesting to be able to have conversations that bridge that gap, and you can do that through reading notable people. So
Yeah. Yeah,
we'll see.
that's the interesting part because there's so much information about the celebrities. So being able to kind of, know something and read something from an aspect of their life, I think that is one of the most phenomenal things I've always seen in your shows. Where this has been a story for somebody who's never really talked about publicly, and then for you to dive deep, that must be really like so out of this world. Interesting, yeah.
It's like yourself. It's like a journalist. On some level, there's an aspect of creating a conversation and being able to contribute to that dialogue.
Yeah, no, for sure. Something that I recall also from past conversations was how the readings take a lot of energy out of you. And now that you are so seasoned and you have, you've grown in this industry, you have, understood yourself and your body. How do you manage now the emotional intensity and then your well-being while delivering these messages?
It's the same as it always has been, just one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. There is no guidebook. If there was a college one could go to understand the ins and outs of this in its entirety, I would have gone like X-Men, the academy. But unfortunately, it doesn't exist. And so I find that for me, it's really just been a process of trial and error of being able to, in all positions, embrace vulnerability. And I think one of the biggest challenges, but one of the most gratifying things I've learned is to be able to be okay with the rawness of how one feels and understanding that feelings pass and evolve and grow just as we do.
And you've been doing this for like a decade, a little bit more than a decade now. What is something that you've learned about yourself through mediumship that has, kind of contributed to your outlook on life and your relationships with everyone?
I think I've really learned from this work the idea that one does not have to have all the answers to gain comfort and value from something. And that applies to my own work. I have so many questions, philosophical, subjective, objective, about the nature of how these readings happen, how information comes through, why it comes through to me of all people, and also to many others. But I have my own questions there that I don't think will ever fully get resolved. And yet I still do what I do with the goal of trying to contribute to the conversation, to provide some resolve, to try to leave people better than I found them. But I think people, myself included, who intellectualize are very inclined sometimes to be overwhelmed by the ins and outs, the bits and the bobs of how is it possible. We don't have to know for it to have value.
I want to ask something that I know a lot of viewers, they're going to be introduced to you with Netflix, but you've done so many live readings. What was one of the most, impactful live readings you've had in your career that you feel like when you are going to be on this show, that reading is exactly the type of thing you want audiences to learn about and see?
There was a reading I actually did not long ago, a few months ago at a live show. And in this, I brought through a firefighter who had passed away. And when he came through, he communicated to me one image, and it was of basically, like the four-leaf clover charm. And it was an image very clearly, an iconography of it. And as I saw this and described it, the person validated that that made sense to them, that they knew that this firefighter at his time of passing had had on him this four-leaf clover, like keychain. And on it said number one dad. And it was one of the few objects they were able to retrieve from his body. And so that one object was so much more than an object, right? It symbolized not only him being number one dad, but it was one of the few things that remained. And so it really exemplified how the small things become big things in hindsight, but also how, when I do readings in the future, how a single image can represent so much more than its initial form and validate things on levels I could never even imagine.
Well, that's beautiful. I think that's so sweet. And you get to connect with all these people. And there's so many rewarding, comforts and closure that you're giving these audience members. So I'm just excited for everyone to finally see this show and to like get to know you on like another level, because the first show did amazing. And I was really hoping for a season two because it was phenomenal, but we get to have you now for 8 episodes weekly starting September 17th. So I'm very, very excited.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I'm so excited to get to talk to you, and I can't wait to do it again.
I can't wait to do it again. And then one last question before I let you go. You're on Netflix. So is there a show you're binging that you can share with audiences that you love so much?
I love selling Sunset. What can I say? I love a good real estate show.
No, it's good. I love real estate too. It's a lot of fun. But Tyler, thank you so much always for your time. It's just always a pleasure chatting with you. And Live from the Other Side premieres on Netflix on September 17th, and I can't wait for everyone to see it.